Welcome to Tetewathá, Partyline talk show. I'm your host, Luann Stacy, and today is MCK Friday. And today I am joined, actually it's kind of like a two-parter. I'm joined by Frank McComber and Chief Clinton Phillips. Sorry, guys, it's Chief. I'm also be joined by Chief Ross Montour for the second part of the show, and we're going to talk about a totally different topic. Welcome to the show. I know it's been a little bit chaotic. Lots of major topics kind of hit the community, some locally, some on a higher level. It seems to be coming from all over the place. You're on the show today to talk about the situation with the asbestos in Lot 106, I believe, is it? Yes, I got it correct. Okay. I guess, what is the plan and what is going to happen? I've seen many things on social media, from talk of lawsuits, from people concerned about the health and safety, asbestos in the air, all kinds of things. So I don't know if you could maybe give us an update on maybe things that you're aware of and what's going to be the next steps of action. Oh, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. What we plan on doing is Tuesday we have a public meeting to the community members. At first we just wanted to do it to the locals who were specifically affected by the dumping. And then we decided the whole community can get involved because there's private contractors, there's all kind of private workers that were in the area. So it's kind of a community meeting now. We have a doctor coming in from Mount Sinai. His name is Dr. Lucchini. He's a specialist in health when it comes to, I guess, this type of
being exposed to asbestos.
Yeah, pipe fragments. Again, it's pipe fragments, right? I know that people keep on saying it's asbestos, but it's pipe fragments that were dumped in the lots. I think the miscommunication has been a lot is that these pipe fragments, were dumped into soils, and what we did is we overdone it by removing the soils completely, rather than just removing the pipe fragments, which EXP, our consultant, basically told us to do. So I think it's important that the community knows that we are going far and beyond, what we're supposed to be doing in this, but at the same time, it's taken extremely long and people are getting frustrated, and we completely understand.
Especially because I think there's some new homes in that area, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of homes in the Lot 106 area, and I think it's very important to underscore what Frankie has just informed the community of. We did immediately hire an environment. EXP is an environmental group. They're not contractors or anything of that nature. And if anybody knows environmentalists, they always err on the side of caution in the environment 100%. So it's important to note that that's who they are. So their recommendation at first was, and still is, that capping it with X amount of topsoil would be good enough in their mind. But we decided to go the extra mile and have it removed for everybody's peace of mind, and to show the community that, we're walking the talk in terms of, keeping things clean and for our future generations and all these things. Not to say that there was something that was done here that should not have ever been done. And we are fixing the wrong, and unfortunately things move not at the speed that I guess people would like, and I get the concern from the community. We all get the concern from the community. We are all concerned. I think in my 1 decade of being in politics so far, this is probably the worst case that I've been involved in, work related, and so it is causing a lot of anxiety on my part as well. But I have read the report from the experts. I have been informed of a lot of different things, and I think the community will breathe a sigh of relief when they meet with these experts, the experts from EXP, and also Dr. Lucchini, who's coming in from Mount Sinai. And it's important to note that we're talking about Mount Sinai in Manhattan. This is the same doctor who was on the team who dealt with 9/11 survivors and the whole issue there. So he's from an organization that is extremely well versed and knows everything about asbestos and breathing issues and things of that nature. So we are spending, we're doing whatever we can to get the best people here to hear our people and hear the concerns of the people, and hopefully bring some of the anxiety levels down.
Because I think that's what's happening is everybody's anxiety's going up. People are reading into more things and don't have correct information or what the impacts are. Some people were complaining about the dump trucks passing by, and the particles getting in the air. And this is just what I've seen on social media. And then other people start talking, and I'm not sure because I'm not familiar with the topic. So I can't say one way or another.
And that in itself adds to the problem. We have a whole group of people who are living in a specific area, and some people are making light of the situation by posting things, and people seem to be experts at all different issues, and really they're not. So they're adding to people's anxiety levels, which are already stretched to the max. So I don't believe that is helping anybody as well. People are concerned, and rightly so. And when you hear of an issue like asbestos, if you say like Ebola or anything else in the world, or nuclear contamination, your brain automatically assumes the worst and goes there. And I don't fault anybody for that. So did mine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we're not there. That's not the case here. And like I said, people will, I think, really have sense of ease when they hear Tuesday what will be told to the people there. So I expect a lot of questions asked from the community, a lot of back and forth with our experts. But at the end of the day, these people are some of the best in the world that are coming here to explain things to people and what moving forward, what's going to happen.
I guess another question on this is, have there been the local health people involved in helping you with this? Like the community health workers and environmental, Donnie, Gilbert, and them?
At this point, no.
No, okay.
At this point, no. We're doing exactly what EXP
advise you to do. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And people are talking about the dust on the roads and everything, but at the same time you have to take into consideration that every road in Kahnawake, because it's been an extremely dry summer, there's nothing washing the streets and flushing the regular debris that happens on roads and highways is on a daily basis. So that's adding to some of the fear. But again, everybody's kind of on eggshells here, and I don't blame anybody for their concerns.
Yeah. So in terms of how this event happened originally, you'll be looking at that and setting up some parameters so that doesn't happen again. I guess that's the bottom line.
There is a compliance audit that's on the way.
Okay.
That's been started. But I want to get back to what you were talking about earlier about the process maybe of how we're removing the soils. So what we're doing is we're using the wet procedure, which we have to wet the soil down. But as we're wetting the soil down, the tires are picking up the mud and they're dragging it on the road. And as we're watering it, it's making it worse. Obviously, you know that I know a lot about trucking, and we've been dealing with this problem for many years. So I understand people's concerns about the dust, but at the same time, that's what trucking does, and the only way to remove it is that way. We tried to look at other ways to remove it. The only way to remove it is by trucking it out. So that's the other issue that we have.
Okay, that answers some of my questions. I was wondering why I've seen areas of wet along the road, so I was curious. And debris, yeah. So in terms of this meeting, where, when, what time, and who is invited to it?
Tuesday, 7 o'clock, Knights of Columbus. The whole community is invited. If anybody has questions, concerns, which I'm sure a lot of us do, I have a lot of questions and concerns still, so we don't know to the extent of how big this is yet, so we're still working on that.
Okay, so you're still assessing it.
We're still assessing it.
Okay.
And I just like, if I could add, Luann, as Frankie mentioned, there is an internal investigation as to who, what, where, when, and why. So that is ongoing, and I just want to reassure the community, because there was a lot of Facebook posts that is being swept under the carpet, and I think that was also at last week's community meeting on Tuesday that somebody accused us of doing that. And trust me, nobody is sweeping this under the carpet. We will come to a conclusion. We're not there yet. we're looking internally as to how this happened. But we're not at the end of that search yet. And when we will be, the community will be made aware of everything.
Because I guess I have some local questions, and one was, how did the pipe fragments get there? Where did they come from? How long did you know about this before notifying the community? Those were like 3 of the questions.
So I'll answer the one that I do know. In a meeting in May 24th, I believe, we're discussing the train tracks, the removal of the spraying of the vegetation. And in the meeting, someone brought up, I wish this many chiefs would show up when we talk about the asbestos problem. And that's what kind of flagged it, and then it started growing. But we had no idea what that meant, right? It took a long time to get the facts and find out what exactly that means before you can go see anybody, never mind the people that lived in the area. So the process takes long in my new position here. Like, I'm really new at it, so I didn't realize how long it takes something to get out from the start until you can actually get it the community notified about it. So that's a struggle for me in that part. So
and one thing we wanted to really do was before once we found out what we were dealing with, we wanted to know exactly what the severity is of what we're dealing with. Was it a minor thing? Was it a major thing? Rather than, so there was a little bit of internal work. Mind you, I mean, it didn't take months and months. It was done as quickly as we can get it going. I know we've been criticized for that, and like I said, I know people are extremely anxious and at this point. So I mean, I'm accepting that for sure, 100%. And we're doing everything we possibly can.
Any other comments, guys?
I think you asked, how could this have happened?
Yes, yeah, that was one of the
I think
community's
internally
questions.
we're trying to figure out exactly how this mistake could have happened. Also, it's really hard to put your mind around how this could happen for so long.
And I think if I can add one last thing, and we made it a point at the community meeting to inform those who were present that the product that we're talking about, the pipe itself, was something that was used North America wide. It was the product of choice. So I mean, within North America, there's probably millions of miles of this type of piping that occurred. Nobody knew what asbestos was at the time. This isn't asbestos whole material. It's fibers of asbestos that was mixed into the concrete in creating the piping. So that's what we're dealing with. They're fibers. It's not unlike, nobody knew lead in paint was an issue back in the day, and half of our homes in Kahnawake had lead paint.
Right.
Nobody knew any different. Back then, like I said, 40 years ago, this type of piping was the ideal pipe to choose for communities and in North America. So it's widely used.
Okay, one more time on the meeting so people will know where, when, and time.
Tuesday, 7 p.m., Knights of Columbus. There is one thing I want to add, though.
Go ahead, Frank.
I think it's important for the community to know that we are doing everything we can to make sure we fix this problem. We know it was a MCK unit that caused it, and we are making sure that we're fixing it. I think it's important the community knows that.
Absolutely.
Clinton, one last word?
Again, just to echo Frank's words, we're doing everything we possibly can to make this wrong or right this wrong, and we're not going to leave any stone unturned. Okay. I guarantee that to the community.
Okay, so if you get a chance, Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, Knights of Columbus Hall, please be there, especially if you have questions. Here's your chance to get your questions answered from experts, Thank you, Chief Frank McComber, and thank you, Chief Clinton Phillips. We'll take a break, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
And welcome back to Tetewathá, Partyline Talk Show. I'm your host, Lance Stacy, and joining me for the second part or the remainder of the show is Chief Ross Montour. And welcome to the show.
Welcome. I'm so welcome.
I know.
These are my old, the old K1037 cans I got on. That's how we call them in the business, cans.
So I guess you've been busy, and like the other chiefs, lots happening, especially right now. And I guess we could talk about some of the updates and some of the things that you're involved with.
Okay. Well, you know what? The thing is that, we have portfolios, and then you have everything that happens. Okay.
Yes.
And everything that happens is just like the situation with the unfortunate and sad situation about asbestos, which Frankie and Clinton were addressing a moment ago. But as a table, we face that, eh?
Yeah.
So there's always that thing is, the buck always comes back to the table. It always comes to us, and so we have to sort of deal with those things as they come up. The other issue may be Mercier Bridge, geotechnical drilling, and that's another thing that ends up coming to the table. It comes at different levels too. I mean, you sort of talk about environment. Okay, you talk about consultation, which I am involved in, duty to consult kind of stuff, as well as the environment. And so that's something we may talk about that also. But really, the thing that I was going to bring to the community today is there's an environmental enhancement project taking place, which is a result of, it's a compensation project from the Champlain Bridge project, in which there was habitat there that was affected in the negative, and so this is an attempt to address and remediate some of that by enhancing habitat in other places. In this case, the Ile-de-Pays archipelago, which is in between Beauharnois, roughly Chateauguay, between Leary and I think the other name of the place is, but it's out there, and it's going to have an impact on hunters, as a matter of fact. And so, in terms of the outreach they made to us is that, so for the 2019-2020 hunting season, they're going to be beginning work this month, and it'll extend over into the next year. And so what they're saying is that in order for the workers to be able to do the work that they need to do, they're asking their licensed hunters, particularly bird hunters, because it's a migratory bird sanctuary, but which allows for hunting. And of course, with us, you have to talk about what our hunting rights are outside of the whole permit process, and so they have approached us about that. And so they put out a call to us, and they've suggested, and this is that the weekend they're contemplating allowing hunting for in that restricted area would be the first migratory bird hunting weekend, which they have pegged at September 21st, 22nd of this year. And so that's what they're applying in terms of outside their own hunting constituency out there. And that's going to be something fast. And they're asking us, our hunters, to cooperate with that. But they're open to meeting with us in terms of that. The one thing is I don't know, whether anybody from the community, hunts over there or not. There was some outreach, and there was a couple of men. Actually, I don't want to mention by name in case I don't have their permission to. But our hunters, who didn't know of anybody from the community that hunted in that area. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But the other side of that, Luann, for me, which is really important, because I deal with in the consultation file, we get all kinds. We get barraged with, this calls for consultation and like for accommodation for projects and so on, and they have a duty to consult. Okay, and oftentimes, I find the way those things get weighted out in terms of how they respond to what our concerns are based on what they perceive is actually our use of a given area or not. Okay, degree of, and we come from the perspective is, look, it doesn't matter whether one person is using it or none at this time. Okay, it's within our traditional territory, and if it resumes at some point, it has to be protected for our use. But I think that I would want to encourage people who are in our hunting community in Kahnawake, of which there are a number of people. It's not one or two. But partly what I'm saying is without going on a limb here, I want to encourage people to learn about where these areas are and use them as much as possible, because that only strengthens our hand when we're talking to these people about what our concerns are. And like the issue of anything having to do with consultation, from my perspective, my own view, my own worldview, if you want to put it that way, it's the way I put it, comes from the Tetewathá perspective. Okay, is that if you want to talk to me about, if you want to talk to us about cumulative effects, you cannot do that, okay, on the basis of there's this project over here near Quebec, and we're only talking about what happens 10 miles out. All these things link up, and they become part of a chain, and that's what the cumulative effects really are. The cumulative effects is that over the last 75 years, the last 100 years, the quality of the water, the quality of the life in the water has all been negatively impacted. And it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating to me, if you said people just look at one or two specific species, and they don't take into account the whole web of life, if you want to put it that way. And you know what? Yesterday was last night watching television, a news channel, and half of one whole program was on the burning of the Amazon forest. And I'm thinking, you know what? I mean, there's with all the nonsense happening in the world, with all the denialism that's happening in the world. Okay, this, like, to me, I take it to heart in a way that is really disturbing. It's like when I talk about it, I'm not throwing words out there. There's if you want to consult, don't make it a checkbox exercise. So one of the things in relation to this is I want that information to be put out to Kahnawake hunters that may or may not use it, and they may want to use it, and I encourage them to use it. And if they're happy with the September 21st or 22nd window that being allowed during this period of time when the environmental remediation is taking place, then do it. Okay, and the other thing is, if the other side, we're not disposed or opposed to the idea of, say, meeting with them, and they've asked to meet with us, the project people, saying, well, our hunters may wish a different 2 days or what have you to do that. But so I would encourage anybody who is a hunter, if they want to contact us at the Mohawk Council, you can either contact myself, it's ross.montour at mck.ca, or tanya.perron at mck.ca, and we'd like to hear from people about that.
I guess it's interesting. I guess in a positive direction, they did contact you. I guess that's a positive per se. But I guess the other question is when you're talking hunting and windows and birds, you get into the environment, lots more questions pop up that, like trying to understand, Well, yeah, as I say, I mean, excuse me, the concern that I have, okay, when you start talking about things like cumulative effects, we've been talking. I went to the Hill in, matter of fact, it was April. It was hearings for Bill C-69, which were supposed to strengthen the environmental laws and allow for people to, say, trigger regional assessments and so on. And from the conservative side of them, they actually left when the indigenous people went to do our testimony. Right. Okay, they didn't even want to hear from us. Okay, their concern was, they're only going to want to shut it down. They're only going to want a veto. Who are these people to have a veto? And they don't. What they fail to take into account is, number one, when the question you ask isn't it ever reasonable to say veto something? Really? Okay. What's the litmus test for that? Okay. When you reach that threshold, and that's one side of it. The other side of it being, if you're going to consult with us, we
take the position that, you know what, if it's good for us, and when I'm talking about what I bring from what my traditional knowledge is in terms of the process. And that is something, is that whatever you do, whatever you consider, you have to consider the impact on the peace, you have to consider the impact on the environment and the faces yet to come.
Yeah.
I know a lot of times we just couch that in the term about 7 generations, and that's fine. Okay, but at its core, that's what you're talking about. You say, well, how does this affect the peace? And the peace is more than just whether we're at war with one another.
Right.
It's about how we're relating as families and the environment. If you say the next part is consider the environment, we're a part of that environment.
Absolutely.
That's okay. We're a part of that. And because we do that, then we take into consideration the faces yet to come. And what we say to those people, what I say to those people is, if you do those things, if you hear us, okay, if you respond to us, it's not only good for us, it's good for everybody. But the problem is that I see all the time is that you see decisions are being made on the basis of commerce. They're being made on the basis of, we need more electricity, we need more goods and services, And they'll tell us on the one hand that, this is not going to have, the Beauport expansion in Quebec City is not going to have an impact on shipping through the St. Lawrence Seaway Canal. But meanwhile, there's a study going on by the Seaway Corporation,
right,
on that, and you don't tell me that, okay? Because I say, I was literally not born yesterday.
Yeah,
I remember when that Seaway came through. I walked on the bed of that before they let the water through.
And you also know the impact of it.
Absolutely.
Now, and how many years later? Correct.
The impact is going on and on and on, and so that's. I approach that passionately. I don't ever get much of a chance to talk about it. We'll talk about real things that are happening. We talk about land negotiations. We talk about all those things. But consultation is important, and that's on. That's at the core of right now. There's things going on with regard to the Mercier Bridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And before, maybe if even touch on that at all, it wasn't necessarily the idea that I was going to come and talk to you. But what I'm going to mention?
What?
Is I've had conversations with people about, the fact that, okay, there's an issue, obviously, in the community that people know about, in terms of the possible reconstruction of the southbound link of the Mercier Bridge up to the federal side. Okay. And during conversations, I've said, gee whiz, how do we get into this trade? And the train bridge is right next to us,
Yes.
And that's how we got. And then what comes to mind, and I just want to remind people, coming up on August 29th, and I'm a little bit ahead here, is the anniversary of the Quebec Bridge disaster. The reason I want to bring it up is, right now, I went with a community member who brought it to my attention to take a survey there, and there were a number of cameo photographs that are missing from the monument that was placed up by council. And I don't know how they're gone. It's about 4 or 5. So I want to encourage people to become involved, but also just sort of the upkeep, but just looking after maybe the potential replanting of trees. Some of the trees we knew when they were planted wouldn't survive. You never know what those things, but each of those trees around that monument represent one of our fallen workers, fallen men.
Okay. Other updates you have?
Right now, just if you want to talk about, if you want to field anything to me, go right ahead. But in particular, not just in terms of portfolio stuff at this point?
Any kind of updates or other things happening?
No. I don't want to say nothing else is happening. Many things are happening.
Right.
Okay.
I guess we could talk a little bit, and you said you weren't exactly the person to talk about, but the federal court, approving the the funding for day schools. And, what's the impact of that, like, on the community? I know they said you can opt out, but I didn't quite understand why would someone opt out, or, and I thought the announcement was quite quick because I was expecting it to be a little bit longer.
Well, this is Luann, okay. In a way, I'm glad you brought it up. Because if we're talking about the impact of Indian day schools, that's a really interesting story from my perspective. The question of the reason, the rationale for somebody, say, like formally opting out or objecting to the process, that actually occurred. Before the summer actually began. Almost as soon as we heard of it, we had a presentation from the law firm handling that, and the timelines were very short. Okay, so to respond to your question as to why somebody would object, I talked to one of our legal staff at Mohawk Council, who brought it to my attention that the timeline was very narrow for that, and so why would you object? And the thing is that if you disagree with how that's being handled, how that's being settled, if you miss a deadline, then you won't be able to say raise a concern or initiate another lawsuit beyond that cutoff date, and that's what that was speaking to, as I recollect. Now, as to the impact of residential schools, I got to tell you from a personal perspective. Number one, I had never ever thought of it. I had been my first marriage was to a person from the Ojibwe Nation, and in their communities they were heavily impacted by residential schools. And of course, there are people in our own community that were impacted by that. We have families who are affected generationally with that. So for me, sitting there, and it was almost a revelation. I'm sitting there, I started out my school life at Cattery School. I saw some things. My experience of the thing was there. But what really angered me, what really frustrated me, and made me think about an objection was the way they were parsing it out in terms of they're sort of monetizing the kinds of atrocities that may have occurred to you, and they're telling you, well, it's going to be at least exhausting in terms of the kinds of proofs you'll have to do and everything else. And if you just went there, if you just attended an Indian day school, you're worth $10,000, and so on up to $200,000, and they're monetizing the suffering that way. And I was starting to get angry. And saying, well, you know what? I don't minimize or I don't diminish the level of suffering that some individuals may have experienced. On the other hand, you know what? There's a reason why I don't speak my language.
Absolutely.
There's a reason, okay, that those things, and that was all part of a process. And when the hell, pardon me, on K1037 to the listeners and to you as the host, but that's the level of it, and it could be worse, believe me. When the heck do we hold them accountable?
Absolutely. In
a real way, instead of dictating out and saying, well, this is what it's going to be. That's the best deal you're going to get, brother. And let's say, sign up for your thing, then go away.
Your $10,000.
Here's your $10,000 for all your pain and suffering, and go away.
On that note, we'll take a break, but we're going to come back because I have a couple other questions.
Alrighty.
And welcome back to Tetewathá, Partyline Talk Show. I'm your host, Luann Stacy, and today is MCK Friday, and I'm joined by Chief Ross Montour, and right now we're talking about the federal court's, approval for the class action suit settlement. And, one of the things I want to ask, I've been involved with courts in many different courtrooms, different types of courtrooms, and I found this went really quick. And it was something that you said as you were earlier, like it was like, here, we're going to give you something and that's going to be it. And it's going to solve everything for all these years of loss of language, loss of, for some people, it was a loss of who we were as a community. It was a loss of who we were, So I am wondering beyond that, if people have questions or concerns, what can people do? And that was why I had originally asked about the opt-out thing, because right now, do you think it's something that people should be challenging or just go with it? Just a thought, your thought. I know it's a loaded question, but
you're of the opinion that or your information suggests that there's still time to opt out of it.
Yeah.
And the last I had heard, and I'm going to say that I could be just totally wrong on it, but the last that I heard that window passed already.
Okay.
And it's down to now the payouts of those things, and that process as it's going to unfold. And I know that we're getting questions at council about that. I'm afraid to say her first name.
Gaditaguyo?
Yeah,
Jocko.
Jocko, okay, is fielding a lot of those calls. And so if people have questions about, call her, email her, for information. And what we are doing is preparing to say how we're going to engage with the community about that, because there will be questions as to when the process, when can we say apply for compensation from that, which is it's not unimportant. That's not my issue. My issue is not that we need to be compensated. I look back at the process that went through with the residential schools.
Yes.
Okay, and the settlements that went on. One of the arguments for, or one of the bottom lines, okay, for the government, that was the Harper government at the time, in order to get the apology, was that's the end of it. No more lawsuits. No more. This is the line drawn in the sand. You get your apology, and then almost on the next day, in the same breath, they cut the Aboriginal Healing Fund.
Yes.
Like they slashed it. Okay, it's like it's done. And I don't know how I would necessarily characterize the current government, which may be leaving shortly. I hate to say it, but they seem to attract scandal, like Pigpen, attracted dust in the Peanuts comic strips. The thing is that I think that's really a transactional kind of approach to things, even with regard to, the loss of language. I mean, you look at that situation. Harper never did anything with regard to that.
No.
So the Liberal government has at least given some sort of lip service to the idea, but I've yet to see an impact, say, in Kahnawake in terms of how money is coming in to fund language restoration. Okay, I've seen them talking about, translating documents and so on. And that's like, well, okay, how many people are literate in any language? And that's a way that sounds a little negative, but to say, there are people who speak their languages, are not necessarily writers of their languages or readers. And by the way, are you going to translate legalese into, say, Anishinaabe or Ganyageha?
Yeah.
Number one, you cannot do it.
No.
Okay, it's not possible. So really, what are you going to do? So a lot, it begs the question, okay, so now what next? What next, okay? And I remember talking to residential school survivors 20 years ago, in anticipation of that settlement. And say, you know what? That's not going to fix what I'm going through.
Right.
Okay? But damn it, give it to us, okay? But, people took the apology and said, well, okay, at least it's something. I think all that was apologetics, and basically was saying we now realize there's no place for residential schools because guess what? Mission accomplished.
Yeah. Because that was the intent of it. That was really the intent.
And so we have been feeling the impact of all of those things for a number of generations now. So
I'd like to move on a little bit to talk about the Mercier Bridge.
Okay, ask a question.
What are your thoughts in terms of the whole process and in terms of moving forward? People have been kind of on both sides. The start of it, the field work, there was some misinformation, some misunderstanding. So, does it benefit the community? Does it not benefit the community? There have been people who've even thrown out, let's look for a new place for a new bridge. So I don't know.
What I can tell you is that people in the community have concerns. A moment ago I spoke about, the fact that I was literally not born yesterday. I watched APTN episode where Kenneth Deere was interviewed, And I spoke to Kenneth about that, And I said, you're older than I am, but I remember that also. I remember the fact that we were made poor by that. Okay, our house, the family home was gone. Okay, my mother got sick, and we attributed it to the quality of the water that came about. Okay, so we didn't have access to the river. We were in the seaway, and whatever was around in the water at that point in time. So I understand that point. And when you start talking about things like not one more inch, yeah, I'm on board. I got all of that. Okay, but the thing is right now, what is important is that we have to take into account all of the community. And it's not all one thing, I mean, there is the environment in which I've spoken to people, say with the 203, the 207, 207, in terms of the environmental stuff. I'm, responded to calls for meeting on that. Have initiated meetings with them also, a meeting with them. And so they issued, whatever their position was in the way that they posed it. And that's important to take into consideration. It's also important to take into consideration, if you say, as you say, you raised up whether, maybe some people are saying, well, build it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. The only problem is, like, I've heard people say, well, build it in St. Catharines, build it in Delson. But the problem is that's our land too. Okay, it's not our land, so that's not an issue. But one of the concerns, I mean, you look at the situation of how, regardless of who's responsible for the squabbles between Quebec and the feds in terms of the upkeep of the bridge, because you got a bridge which is on the south side is the Federals, and on the other side is Quebec, and they're fighting on a political. It becomes a game, as far as I'm concerned, and the bridge falls into greater disrepair year after year after year. And people have talked about, it's not safe. I talked to one of the workers on the bridge. He said, well, the thing moved. The pier moved 4 feet.
Wow.
Okay, at one point. Okay. And yes, we're, deeply concerned with the environmental things, and we've held it off for a year. But there are things that have to do with the safety. We have children that go to school. Some of our kids have gone to school over the bridge for their entire lives. That's choices that parents make. Would it be? How do people feel about that? I'm not saying whether it's right, whether it's wrong, whether it's another bridge, whether there's no bridge. Okay, and then there's the issue of the employment side of that. There's also the issue of economy. It impacts on economy. And so, one of the things I would look for is hearing from the community on a broader context. So what I can tell you is that because of the one situation, there was a communication from one of the longhouses to the MTQ wanting a meeting. A way to do that is something that we would want to see happen, and so that's what's currently from our side of things being met. We've talked and spoke to MTQ with regard to that. The whole thing is that we have to take into account everybody in the community. It's not it's not picking a fight with one body or another body, or a struggle between one body and another body. But everybody in Kahnawake needs to consider that, needs to weigh that in, and that goes back to the thing I was saying earlier. When you talk about when we consider the decisions that we make, okay, we have to take into account the impact on the peace. We just had a recital of the great law of peace. Okay, we have to take into account the environment, and we have to take into account the faces yet to come.
Yeah. I have a quick question on this. We have about 3 minutes left, but I want to ask you how this topic came to the front, or to, with the Longhouse bringing the issue up and council having to respond. And I had Chief Rhonda Kirby on with me and the Grand Chief, and we talked a little bit about it. But are there ways that we could work together collectively to start looking at some of these larger things? And you have like 2 minutes to answer that. I know it's not much, but
I go ahead. Let me go.
Yeah, you go, Ross.
So the thing is that, let's say, at least from the time when I ran for council, one of the things that was concerning me, there were things that were impacting on us and affecting us from outside, and I've been so aware for so long about the divisions that have been caused by colonialism in our communities. Okay, and so for a long while I've been saying like, okay. So I've been on both sides of it. I've been on that side and saying, the band council or entities of the Canadian government, and at some point, what I was saying, and I was saying to different people is, when are we going to remove the lines and the circles?
Yeah.
Okay? Because we don't have time. I've had people say to me, well, you know what you got to do. You got to, like, whether it's 8 points of jurisdiction, what have you, whatever the case may be. But, I think at some point, and I've talked to different people, like traditional people, about the need for that. But what I'm afraid of is that sometimes now we're so caught up in our orthodoxies, in our trenches, and so become entrenched in the way we deal with it. Look at what's going. You say Bill S3.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That just dropped.
Yeah.
Okay, and if there's a rationale for us to not fight with one another about how we deal with the things impacting on our lives, then let's get together on that. Okay, and that's something that we should all bring ourselves together on doing it. I said to a traditional person, Kenneth Deere, as a matter of fact, when I first got elected, can't we? Okay, if we can't, can we not at least meet at the edge of the woods?
Yeah.
Okay, can we not meet there? And when I met with them recently, I said, let's take Aswante. The Tetewathá, okay? Say we're in the ship and you're in the canoe. Well, there's a silver covenant chain between, and we need to polish that. We need to work that. But most of all, let's remove the barriers from one another, and let's talk to everybody.
And I think that's the key to a lot of this. That's why I want to ask, because I foresee some other bigger issues coming our way, and we have to stop.
Well, the bridge is important.
Taking the walls down a little bit and start talking about it as a collective.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. Thank you for joining me, Chief Ross Montour.